Welcome to the Romantasy Library.
Welcome everyone to the Romantasy Library. My name is Kate Perkins, and today I'm going to be interviewing Dana Evyn. She's author of The Other Side of the Mirror, and I'm so excited and honored to have her here, especially this is my very first episode, so bear with us, guys, as we're getting all of this together. But welcome, Dana.
Thank you so much, Kate, for having me. I really appreciate it. This is my very first podcast, so bear with me as well, because as is the case for a lot of authors, I feel like I may be a little bit more well-written than I am well-spoken.
It's all good. I'm just so excited to be here with you. I first read Dana's book with an ARC, which just means that it's an early release, and I got to write a review for it, and I fell in love with it. And so I'm just so excited to learn more about you, Dana. And I did happen to get the book today in the mail.
I love seeing it in the wild.
Yeah, it is stunning. Amazon said it was going to be coming tonight at 8, and I was like, no. And so it was such a happy surprise when I got it on my doorstep this morning. I was like, this is perfect timing.
Only a month after release. We had a little bit of a misprint issue. So we finally got, those are finally arriving like right now. So I'm very excited to see all these hard copies and the paperbacks too.
Paperback is gorgeous as well. I'm a sucker for a hard copy. And I know I'm
also a hard copy person. Well, you can see behind me. I like a good hardcover, especially for fantasy.
And I see it right there. Hey, but I did have a quick question. Who designed this? How did you come up with the design?
That's actually M.I. Blart who did it. It is they do a lot of covers. They're a cover design sort of a company, and they did a great job. But it was, it was I'm through a small indie publisher, and it was through them that there was sort of a back and forth where I knew I wanted the mirror. I wanted that like right from the get-go. Like this is, if you've read the prologue, like that is the mirror that sort of sets the stage and the scene for the whole book. And we've got some fantasy forest stuff in there, and I really love what they did with the chapter headings with sort of a fairy lights and more forest scenes. Can you tell I'm from the PNW where there's just forests everywhere?
Yes, absolutely. It definitely has that vibe. I was also going to say too, I love the map. Let's see if I can find it. I love a good map of the world. I know not all readers look at maps, but I'm a big sucker for it, and I always refer back to it just to keep track of all of the places and the names, because fantasy world names can be a little
for sure. Yes. So that map, my husband actually made me that map. It was my Valentine's Day gift. I was kind of hassling him for it because he does D&D, so he's made maps before, and that was my dog whining. Sorry. And then the map itself is there's one little Easter egg if you finish the book that you can find, but I'm not going to tell you what it is. I'll tell you after, but I don't want to spoil anything because it is technically a spoiler.
But I can ask you afterwards. Sorry, guys. Sorry. But we will definitely be editing that one out. But yes, I want to know.
Perfect. I will tell you. Yes, but not now.
I love this. You guys probably can't read it. The author's note talks about your mental health matters. Please be mindful that the other side of the mirror includes the following themes. And I really do appreciate that, especially since mental health is so important. And I do think we'll probably be incorporating some mental health questions in this, but I feel like the romantasy genre absolutely has themes of like mental health. And I love that
it's really important that, especially if there are, content warnings that people should be aware of I was careful to, not include spoilers, though if you do go to my website, there are through the content warning some spoilers, but I think that people should know what they're getting into before they read anything with that sort of adult, or even just the fact that this is a smutty book, and like, you don't want people going into it thinking, oh, this is a YA or young adult, or because that is not the case. So at the very least, it's nice to give people that heads up and make sure that they can keep their mental health foremost. But for those who look at the content warnings and get excited, I also see you.
Yes, I just think it's so thoughtful and very trauma informed. So I wanted to say that too. And I haven't seen a book that has the
QR code. Yeah. Actually, that my publisher did that. I thought that was a really nice touch because I just have
way to go, publisher.
Yes.
Yeah, that was a good call.
Set of eyes. Yeah.
No,
Sorry?
I love it. Oh, I was just saying I really appreciated that. So sweet. So Dana, let's just get some background, just a little bit more about you, like where you're born, raised.
Yes. So I'm from Kirkland, Washington, PNW, West Coast, Best Coast, all that. I live right outside of Seattle, but a little closer to the mountains. And as I mentioned, you'll see a lot of PNW in the forests that I always seem to find in my books. But I was born in upstate Albany, New York, but I moved to Washington pretty young. So
okay. Yeah. How did you get to Washington from New York?
Oh, my parents ended up moving out here for a job, so it worked out pretty well. I come from a family of 2 sets of twins, so at the time it was just the one set, but it was once there was 4 of us, they're like, well, we're not moving back.
Oh my gosh, 2 sets of twins? That's amazing.
Yeah, I have a twin sister who is like my go-to beta alpha reader. Like, she's the first person to read any version of my books. And then my little brother and sister are also twins.
I love that. So, okay, so there are just 4 total.
4 total, yes. Just in
Sorry. Are you guys the oldest, or were you at?
I'm the oldest, yes. I mean, I'm the oldest by 2 minutes, and because my sister was flipped, so she had to do a C-section, but it's a common joke that she could have been first if she hadn't screwed it up.
Yeah, no, Dana, I would absolutely own that one. And you were the oldest. Great.
Absolutely. But the 4 of us are really close. My little sister read the book, but refused to read the smutty parts, which is fair. And I mean, I was also entirely on board, and then my little brother has absolutely avoided reading it at all. I'm like, this is also fair.
That is also fair. Yeah, no, and you also posted on your Instagram that your grandma read the book.
I cannot get over this. I mean, my both of my grandmas know about the book, and one of them is a former school teacher, and the other one was like, I read all of the shirtless men romance books, and I still read all the romance books, but neither of them have really read fantasy. And this grandma in particular, my mom went down to California where she lives and just gave her the book. And I was like, Mom, I thought I had time to like prepare myself. And instead I just got this voicemail that was like, oh, Dane, it's Grandma. By the way, your mom gave me your beautiful book. And then it's Grandma, I love you. Because, very, grandma voicemail. You got to make sure, even after the entire message, to reassure people of who you are. But yes, it made me kind of wish I, pulled a Ernest Hemingway and chucked it all into the sea, or maybe did a better nom de guerre and not told my family about it. I am very thrilled at the support, but there's nothing like your people that know you reading like such an intimate thing, having a book out in the world. It's one thing for people on the internet and people who have read the genre to read it, and another thing entirely for family and friends.
That was actually one of my questions of like what that feels like, knowing that family and friends will be reading the book. I will say, you guys, the steam is steaming and it is hot, but it's not like, it's not overwhelming. Like I think it's perfectly done.
Thank you. I appreciate that. No.
Yes.
I feel like that sort of intimate relationship is integral to the plot. Like when it comes to this sort of thing, like I didn't feel like I was adding sexual scenes for the just for like the shock value as I hit my plant, or it's just for fun. But I feel like there's like some actually like this is moving things forward I also like I like the romantasy genre in which you have that sort of connection and it's not closing the door on that aspect of the relationship. But yes, the spice is spicing according to a few reviews.
It is spicing, and I definitely have some more questions about that later. But yeah, I thought it was really well done, and you're right. Like I think it did help the plot and this character like development and their relationship together, and so it wasn't. Yeah, I feel like it wasn't there for like just like shock value or whatever.
I mean, that being said, I've read plenty of books where it's more erotica than it is plot, and that's, I mean, all fun when you do get to read that. But in this case, I feel like it's interwoven in a way that moves things forward.
Yeah, I'm definitely a mood reader, and so yeah, sometimes you're just in the mood for smut, and that is.
There's nothing wrong with that.
No. Okay, so we talked a little bit about like growing up, your siblings. When did the love of writing begin for you?
I feel like I've always been sort of in that writing space. Like my day job, I do PR at Microsoft, so I've been in like that sort of like it's not like I'm creative writing, but there's always something that you're writing when you're in that sort of like communications space. But even as a kid, like my twin sister and I were very into it was like the fanfiction.net era when I was like a teenager. So we would read books and then we would read fan fiction and then we would make our own fan fiction. Like, and a lot of times we would actually like tell stories orally because we shared a room. So we would like talk back and forth about what would happen next? Like what's our like AU alternate universe version of, at the time it was, a lot of different books, but I feel like I've always been very interested in that sort of fantasy genre as well. Like I grew up on like Tamora Pierce and like the Winding Circle series and some of those. I feel like that was a very formative era, and I was one of those kids that like literally would try to hide a book under the table and like read it, and my mom would be like, put the book away and actually eat dinner. Like she was very supportive, but a level of go touch some grass.
I love that. Oh my gosh, my kid said that to me this weekend. Literally go touch some grass. I was like, what? Who are you guys? Because I was reading so much. My husband's like, okay. Anyway, that's a whole other story. But yeah,
rude, but that's weird.
I was like, how do you? Okay, all right, okay.
I mean, to be fair, whenever I get up most in my head, I'm like, it's probably time that I, find some actual greenery. There's nothing like, well, especially here, we've got trails. I run my dog. It's been a good anxiety reducer, especially with the whole, book launch thing.
How has that been for you? So like stress levels, like I'm only assuming like just so high, and you're like the baby that you created pretty much, right? Is like out in the world to read, and you worked so hard on this. And
the month before, I feel like I had like a full stress meltdown in which I was just like, I wasn't even excited for a moment because I was just like so freaked out about just it being in the world and like just anxiety spiral and then it got closer and there was like, lovely ARC reviews, which I'm very much as an author against reading your own reviews. Like, I don't think any author should be like on Goodreads, like, cause that's a reader space. But I did make a point of reading all of my ARC reviews just because I am working on the rest of the trilogy. And I wanted to make sure I could incorporate some of those critiques there. But especially as like ARC reviews came in and like I had just like such a wonderful like reception and feedback, especially by like Instagrammers and or bookstagrammers, I suppose the better term. It got me a lot. By the time I hit release day, I was very excited, if completely worn out by the end of that day. But yeah, no, my family and friends have been great, and everyone's been like very supportive, perhaps too supportive in the case of like my grandmothers. But it's been really fun having it out in the world.
What are you reading right now?
What am I reading right now? Oh, I'm reading Penn Cole's Curse of the Everflame series. I just finished book 2, and I just started book 3 because that was a heck of a cliffhanger, which I realize is like
Yes, no, that's so funny. I'm on book 2 right now, Glow of the Everflame. Yeah, it's so good. Yeah, that's a good one.
My sister recommended it, and I follow Penn Cole on like, social media and stuff. So it's been really fun getting into that world, and I just love the character dynamic. But it was funny because she was like the cliffhanger, and I'm like, there's a 3rd book, and she was like, not on Audible. I'm like, it's on Kindle. So I'm just.
Yes.
I realize it is completely, rude of me to be harping on a cliffhanger when my own book ends at a cliffhanger.
I mean, yours for real ends at a cliffhanger.
I'm aware it's a very mean one. I'm sorry. I will try to get book 2 done as fast as possible.
I mean, no pressure.
No pressure.
Also,
it's a lot different though writing this time because I finished most of it. Like my first big draft and second draft was done before book 1 came out. So right now I'm just kind of finalizing and adding to. But it's very weird now writing it and having people that are like waiting for it. Because when I wrote book 1, it was like, well, it'd be kind of fun to finally write this book that's like been kind of in my head, but maybe it won't work out, and nobody knew about it except for like my husband, like eventually, and I slowly told people, but it was one of those things that I kept very close to the chest because I was like, nothing may come of this, and if so, like I'd rather have like a finish. I was always moving the goalposts. Like I'll tell people when the draft's finished. I'll tell people when like I have like a publishing plan. And then a lot of people were just like, you wrote a book and you didn't tell us? And I was like, well, I did before it came out.
Yeah, it's so funny. Yeah, I mean, because I was wondering about that too. So like you work, right? Like you said in Microsoft.
Yes.
Right? Yes. It's like, how are you doing that?
So I was part of the tech layoffs like 2 years ago, and that was really the catalyst to like finally having time and space and just sort of the mental energy to write this. I mean, what ended up happening is everyone was like, you should organize your house, like, spend some time doing stuff you don't normally get a chance to get done. Well, I was, applying for jobs and all that fun stuff. But there's only so many times you can organize your house. And then I was reading so many like romantasy books, romance books, like just anything. I was just inhaling books. I think I read 200 books that year because I was on Audible, and I was just I was like, well, as long as I'm like, organizing my kids' drawers or like figuring out what I'm going to donate from the playroom, I was listening to a book. And I finally got to this point where I was like, I just have this story in my head and I'm going to try to write it down because I know I can write. Like I do it. I do it in my day job. I write less creatively, but especially since I felt so immersed in that world, I was like, if it doesn't go anywhere, it doesn't go anywhere. But there was very much, and also my now 3-year-old at the time was sleeping terribly. Like she just kept waking up in the middle of the night, and I kept on having.
I'm telling you, that is like a form of torture. Like for real, deprivation.
For reals. Oh my gosh. But I kept on having these middle of the night, like 3 a.m., like it's always at 3 a.m., where I couldn't get back to sleep, and I'd be laying in bed and I'd be thinking about this book. Because at the time, it was very just much like scenes. It wasn't like, let's plot this out chronologically. It's like, this is a scene I have stuck in my head and I guess I'll write it down. So I'd write like these little notes, which of course kept me from actually falling back asleep for like an hour. Because every time I thought of something, I'm like, gotta write it down or you're going to forget it by the morning. So I was very grumpy, but I had like a full 9 months of unemployment that I was just like, I'm going to spend this time and I'll write this book. And if it never gets published, it never gets published. Or if I don't like it, I never need to show anybody. But at least it was something to do with that time. And obviously, I'm very happy with how that turned out. So thank God I got laid off.
That's amazing. I have goosebumps as you were talking about that, Dana. I love hearing how people come up with these brilliant ideas. Like, seriously, I'm in awe of like fantasy and romantasy authors. Truly, I am, of like how you came up with this like brilliant idea. Absolutely. So like, goosebumps. I think that's amazing. And then I can imagine too, like as you were writing it down in the middle of the night, that you would get excited, and then I would be like, oh my God, I just wrote this really sexy scene. Just kidding. No, but like I have all these great ideas.
Oh yeah, my notes app was just like a mess. And then you'd wake up and you'd have like these half garbled things that I was like, I'm sure this was a great idea, but I have no idea what it was. So I then ended up getting very much awake because I was like, no, I need to write this down because it's great. And sometimes it was, and sometimes it wasn't come the sunlight of day. But
so like how much out of all of the notes that you've taken, I don't even know if you can answer this question, but like how much I
ended up in the book?
Yes.
Of it, honestly. Like I'm very much, so there's two types of writers, right? There's the plotters, there's the let's outline this, let's get this top to bottom, like I'm going to write this chronologically. That is not me. And I am a full-blown pantser. Pantsers is the seat, let's write by the seat of your pants. And what ended up happening is because a lot of the early ideas was coming from like literally my notes app in like the middle of the night, or like those places where you can really stop and think and you're not distracted, like the shower or like driving, listening to music. I'd like pull over and like jot things down. It was very much pantsing. And then it was, here's my idea for the scene. Here's a couple lines that I had stuck in my head. And then I had another scene. And then it was like, how are these coming together? And so the story really formed because of that.
I love that. One of my favorite, the line of the only way out is through, right? Like, is it?
Robert Frost is actually, I think it's the best way out is through, is something that he wrote. So this is a paraphrasing of that. It's not, straight from me, but it's something, the only way out is through is something that's, very, it's meant to sort of show that character growth, that character arc of like, there's a way out if you search for it. And if you don't give up and you have that resiliency. And I feel like it obviously ties into the characters and a few important mirror connotations, just in the fact that you are going through the mirror. But yes.
I literally was just thinking that when you were saying that. I hadn't thought of that before until literally right effing now. So like, whoa.
It's all moving together. Yep.
It is.
Hey yo, time for an ad. My friend Bree is the proud owner of Miles on Paper. It is an online bookstore where magic and adventure come to life through the pages of indie books. At Miles on Paper, they are passionate about connecting independent authors with readers, and they do this by curating unique blind date book bundles, custom book boxes, blind date puzzles, and a remarkable collection of traditionally published books. By the way, their blind date book bundles are so much fun. I had the honor of getting one myself. I highly recommend. You can find her website at www.milesonpaper.com. Check them out.
How was it like writing some of those traumatic scenes, and that process of that? And so like, how did that feel?
I mean, I'm going to be careful of spoilers, but it was very interesting figuring out the right balance. But I don't think it's a spoiler saying that there is, it got very funny all of a sudden, that there is a sexual assault as part of this book. And I come out right from the gate in the content warning saying this, but I found writing it was, it's almost cathartic in a way. Like you can kind of like figure out how to get these characters into these horrible situations and then find a way to get them back out again. And it was interesting finding a way to have the right balance, because like I didn't want to go too far. I didn't want things to go too far. I enjoy reading books where our authors just aren't afraid of tackling that sort of trauma. But it's scary putting that sort of stuff into the world, knowing that no one's going to react the same way and people are going to judge you based on how your characters are reacting to the situation. But writing it felt deeply personal in that I know how I had my female main character deal with that would be, I mean, it was like, how would I respond to this situation? So I've had a couple people be like, I just don't understand why we need to have sexual assault in a fantasy world. If we're in a fantasy world, why is this happening? And I completely understand that criticism, but it's also, that's not what this book is about. And that's okay if that's not what you want to read. But it's one of the reasons why I have content warnings first and foremost, because it's like, well, if you want cozy fantasy, that is out there for you. And that is not this and not something I write.
Right. Well, and I mean, and the reality is, not to be, I don't know, I mean, in the world that we live in, like 1 out of 4 women and girls are assaulted. So like, I feel like it's actually really relevant to the world that we live in and such an important dialogue.
Absolutely. No, I completely agree, especially in the post-Me Too era. I feel like it needs to be something that's spoken of and
Without shame, that there's like, and I think I do like how, and I don't want to give anything away either, but like how this character responded to that felt very like, I mean, it felt real to me. And I didn't know if you like did any research into PTSD or like, I don't know if it was just kind of what felt natural to you of like, oh, this makes sense for how she would respond to this. But
I mean, for me, it was very much sort of, it felt like a personal reaction. Like I did do some research, but a lot of it was after I had written, because I was like, I want to make sure that this isn't coming across like in any way that would, offend people. And then I was also very careful to have beta readers that I was like, I need a sensitivity read on this. Like, let me know what you think, if this is something that you feel like goes too far. And the overwhelming response was, no, this is great. You handled this well. But there was, a couple really great comments that came from that I definitely included as far as what the final version is. But
that's awesome. I think that's so great. And that, Dana, that you were so intentional about that and wanted to be sensitive for readers. And again, going back to the trigger warning, I think that that's amazing. Because it really did feel very thoughtful and intentional. And, again, I know I've talked about this before, but being a therapist, I do think like bibliotherapy and reading these books, it can be healing. Also, it can be triggering, right, as a reader. And so that piece of like making sure that you're, as a reader, like being like self-monitoring your own responses, and if there are any triggering scenes, like also you can kind of skip forward too a little bit. But I don't know. I think it was really powerful and was curious how that felt for you writing those scenes.
Yeah. It must be so interesting as a reader to have that background in therapy and just have that lens in which to read these sorts of books. Because obviously in Romantasy, having that sort of, I mean, a lot of the big Romantasy books have some sort of sexual assault or in their backgrounds. And it must be fun, interesting coming from that sort of informed eye.
Yeah. I think too, like thinking about some of my clients and like, okay, well, like how would they feel reading some of this? And like knowing as a therapist, like how would I feel if some of my clients read some of these books, of like, I hope this isn't too much of a spoiler. And if it is, we can totally cut this out. So, but the trauma is not between like the two main, like the main characters. Is it okay to say
interests? Yeah. Oh, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay. Just wanted to make
actually good for people to know is it's not between the love interests. Yes.
I wanted to make sure everybody knows that too, that it's not between, the two love interests. And, was that also intentional or what was that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, I've read plenty of dark romance in which the trauma is between the love interests and it's something that shapes that story. And I'm not saying anything against that because, we all read what we read and we all like what we like. But in this case, I had it very much, I wanted to have a sort of a good guy and a bad guy. And it's funny because there's so many morally gray characters nowadays that I do actually plan to write a more morally gray MMC in my near future. But and especially a morally gray villain. But I feel like when it comes to like this topic and sexual assault, I felt very strongly that I had sort of a clear line of like, this is our good guy and this is our bad guy. And it becomes pretty obvious, obviously, after what happens that is the case. Like, we're not going on a redemption arc here.
No, I do love me a good redemption arc, but like,
oh my gosh, I grew up in the Avatar, the Last Airbender era of like Katara shipping. Like,
my husband and I just watched.
The Netflix show. Yes.
My hubs. Yeah, no.
I'm going to fix this real fast. Sorry, my plant and sun is all fighting with each other. So I will. There we go. Slightly less.
Yeah, we just watched it. It was. Have you watched it?
It's very dark. Perfect. You just watched the Netflix one. Isn't that great? I thought they did such a good job with the live action. I'm really looking forward to really looking forward to seeing like future seasons. And I felt like it was so well cast too.
So good. Yeah. Okay, let's see.
There's nothing like Seattle. It's like the weather is like a third character, like wherever you're at, because it's just like the one time you're like, oh, it's gonna be gray skies and rainy today. Nope, the sun is gonna come out and ruin your video feed.
Oh my gosh, I love that, a third character. Or it could be like one of those redemptive villain arcs or whatever. I don't know if that applies here, but okay.
No, the sun is the redempted villain. To be fair, I'll probably go, well, but my hammock's definitely wet. I was going to say my other anxiety go-to is I'm going to sit on my hammock and take 5 minutes, no matter, especially when, as a mom of two, like it's very much if you are reaching a point where you're not going to be a good mother, it is okay, assuming the ages of the children are okay to do this, just step away and space, and hammock on the deck seems to be the good place to do it. Like they'll eventually find me, but
love it. Yeah, so let it be known, everybody, she's not promoting child neglect. Okay. So.
Exactly. Oh man. But let's give you a snack in the kitchen while mommy takes some deep breaths on the hammock is a good go-to.
Yeah, the box breathing. I noticed that. And that was another reason why I'm like, oh, Queen knows about therapy, like I love that you included that. Yeah. And
I mean, that's completely from my own experience. I'm a big proponent of therapy, obviously. I really feel like it's been helpful for my own emotional journey and growth and just life in general. But I've always had a good amount of anxiety, and box breathing is something that's helped me even from a young age. And it's something that I'll do with my kids. Like if, a little bit post meltdown, especially when I feel all amped up from them having that meltdown, I'm like, let's all breathe together. Like we're going to, for them, it's let's smell the flower, and then we're going to hold it, and then we're going to blow out a candle, and then we're going to hold it. And we do like the box as like let's all like calm our bodies down together. So half the time it's for me and I'm just taking them along, but it's something that I use in my own life all the time. So I really enjoyed writing that into the book as well.
I love that. And we do that too at home. And I think it is just as much about it's co-regulation, right? It's like helping you to remain grounded, and breathing is so grounding. And my husband with our kid will do like we'll do like the candles, like blowing in and blowing out, which is sweet that you mentioned that too. But and so sometimes it's so sweet, of like when you're like, okay, let's take a deep breath, and then your kiddo doesn't, you're like, oh my God, this is so beautiful. We're regulating together.
I know. And then when they calm down, I'm calming down because they're calming down. It's all entertaining.
I love it. Okay. Can we talk a little bit about the steam?
Yes.
The steam theme?
Absolutely.
So, Bash is like a hottie with a body. Those scenes were so hot. When you're writing those, I know that if you're not comfortable answering, but do you start to feel like, oh, steamed up a little bit too? Like, what is that?
I mean, you read steam, you write steam, it's all the same sort of reaction. And I often say to people that this romantasy and romance books are very good for a marriage, because when you're reading these books, you're obviously going to have the reaction of, hey, let's do something about this. Because if you're in that sort of mood, why not? So when it came to writing, there was always, my husband was very happy with when I finally hit the steamy parts. And he was actually very cute in the sense that when I would hit stuff, there was a couple things that he read a couple of the scenes, and then he was like, no, we got to try this out. And he actually figured out something that was physically impossible and that I had to edit because of that. Sorry, this is probably too much TMI.
No, it's not. Because I was wondering if any role playing happened, or if you guys tried out any of those positions, but you kind of already answered that of you guys tried something and it was impossible. Oh, yeah. It was hysterical.
Yeah, so it was less role playing and more just, he read the scene and then he was like, oh, so we're going to do something about this. But then he was literally like, if she's sitting on him, not to, spoilers or anything, he was like, I don't know if you can actually do this. So I'm like, all right, well, let's try this out. So it's, very important book stuff.
Yes. And then I know earlier we were talking about this too, and grandmas have been reading. Do you know if they've actually read those parts yet of the book?
So my grandma only reads large print books. So she said she's going very slowly to get through mine. So we have not hit smut, which I'm still very terrified at the thought of my grandma. It's not that I have anything against grandmothers reading romance or smut or anything like that. I have a problem with my grandma reading my romance. But I'm not going to tell her not to. If she wants to, then that's very sweet and supportive, and I will not be able to look her in the eye for the rest of my life.
We all have needs, right? And grandmas have needs too. So that's amazing.
I had no idea my grandma was such a voracious romance reader either until I was like, are you sure you want to read this? And she's like, oh, I've read plenty of romance books. So I'm just like, oh my God. My mom had a similar reaction. I'm like, Mom, I can tell you what chapters have the raunchy, the smutty scenes. And she was like, why? And I was like, so you can skip them? Because my little sister was like, I am not reading anything that has your sex stuff. And I was like, perfect, great, no worries there. And my mom was like, I read all the shirtless 70s romance things. For her, the fantasy was the weird part. She literally finished the book and she was like, I loved it. The romance was great. I didn't think it was too steamy at all. I'm like, Mom, what are you reading that you didn't think that was that steamy? But she was like, the fantasy was weird, but I liked it.
Which, by the way, I love the fantasy. In the grand scheme of things, it was not out of this. I guess because I read Romantasy, but I'm like, that is an interesting response that some people might be like, oh, this is really fantasy. But I'm like, it is, but it's I don't know.
It's second world. You still have a main world, and it's familiar. I didn't do anything. We have some familiar, we've got elemental magic, and obviously shadow daddies are no new thing. And yes, I used a lot of things that I enjoy and I liked, and that it's funny that the people that haven't had that experience with world building before, like my mom, who's just like, oh, this is very fantasy. I'm like, I feel like this is a regular amount of fantasy, but I read a lot of romantasy. So it felt comfortable and familiar to me. Whereas the non-fantasy reader is like, wow, look at all this magic in my romance book.
Yeah, I'm here for the tropes, because I will say, Dana, you did a beautiful job with the tropes.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I feel like there's a lot of tropes that are done. Obviously, these are nothing new under the sun. That's why they're tropes at the end of the day. These are stories that we like and we enjoy and we we want to hear again. And God knows if I see who did this to you, then I am more, I'll probably read that book. So there was,
I love it.
it wasn't like I was like, you know, here's our tropes I like and let's shove them all in a book. But there, as I was writing, there was, well, except for who did this to you, which I was like, I am absolutely putting this into this book, and I know exactly where.
The readers applaud. That was amazing. I love that. Also, I'm like a sucker for like hidden identities. Is that a spoiler?
I don't think so. No, that's fine. I mean, obviously, I feel like it's not a spoiler to be like, there is a dark twist in this book. And I think it's one of the main themes of the book is like literally on the back cover says it somewhere. Yeah. What if the fairy tale is always a lie? Like there is something that you're going to find out. And it's funny, the people that saw it coming and the people that absolutely don't, because there's a good mix of both. And I was like, I feel like it's obvious but I also know what happens. And I had people be like, I was totally blindsided by that twist. And I was like, good. I hope that, there's a couple ones that I felt like were obvious, but I also was like, hopefully that means that the next twist you won't see coming, because this one was, set up to be like, well, that makes sense.
There were like a good amount of twists, and I'm not going to say which one, but I was like, really? I wasn't like super surprised. I was like, I wonder, and it happened. Mm-hmm. But like, I didn't have the exact answer, but I'm like, there's something here.
Mm-hmm. See, I kind of like it when there's a twist where it's like you're bringing the reader along with you, where it's like you have just enough hints to be like, obviously she's going to do something with this, right? Like just be like, that's the end. It's never brought up again. So there's something fun about having the reader along with you, especially as the protagonist is also trying to figure it out and has it in the back of her mind too. So
yes. I'm going to save it for later because it is definitely a spoiler.
Perfect.
So I'm going to save that one for later. Every single trope that I love, it was there. And I just thought it was really well done.
Yeah. No, I've been getting a lot of buzz about Only One Horse, which I just find it as just one of the most fun things, because I love forced proximity. And then in romance, you have only one bed, obviously, which is just like one of the kings of tropes for me, where it's just like, oh no, there's only one bed left at the inn. Whatever are they going to do? And
what are they going to do? I have no idea.
Well, but yeah, there's something so just like fantasy that is the only one horse trope, which is just like, they're you can't stay apart when you're sharing a horse, and it was just so much fun writing that.
That would be so much fun. Absolutely. So okay, did you start working on this novel then like 2 years ago when all of that happened? So you've been working on this for 2 years, or how long have you worked on it?
Oh yeah. Well, so technically I wrote the first line, which ended up being the first line of chapter 1 and not the prologue. But the she was always afraid of mirrors, which became I, because when I first wrote it, I was thinking it'd be third person and I went to first. But anyways, I wrote that first line just years ago. Like I sent it to myself in my email, like maybe I can, like, there's a book here that maybe one day I'll do. And then I had kids and, life was busy and I never touched it again. But when I went to write this, I was like, this is the book that I had planned to write. And then when I was laid off, I think it took like 3 or 4 months to write like a full first draft. And that draft was terrible, but I sent it to my sister and my friend Mel, and they did like a full like read through, and it was really nice having them like team up, because my sister, being my sister, has absolutely no filter, and to be like, this doesn't make sense. Explain this more. This is terrible. Like, and then I also started in third person and switched to first person. So the tenses for that draft was, oh my God, that's terrible. So that first draft, I look back on fondly, but just like in a full cringe that I ever let anybody read it. And then my friend Mel was really great as far as telling me, like, tell me about the world building. Like, I need to know like how this is working. Because I was very much like, I always find it interesting in fantasy books where it's when it's, you know, the human world is right there, and like there should be like a certain level of, sure, we still use horses to get somewhere, but can we not have like some form of magical electricity? So that was something that I was like early on being like, she was like, you need to explain this more. And I'm very glad that that became what it became, obviously. But yeah, the first draft, again, I was unemployed and very bored. So I knocked it out in about 4 months. And then I started querying it, which is about 4 months. And then, but I mean, again, if you're writing for that much of a day, you have a lot more time. Like that was my day job at the time. Like might as well like put everything into it. And I just couldn't stop writing. Like it was just like I'd wake up early and I'd be buzzing and I'd just, you know, like I had an idea and I needed to write it down, and I could get the kids to school and I'd like rush home to like finish like a scene. So it was, I love that. It was very much a mania.
I think it was like flowing through you, you know, exactly. And like, and being a pantser or whatever. So like, were you just writing different scenes, and then how did you like connect them all? Sorry if I'm.
Oh yeah, no. I kept writing like scenes that I liked, and then I figured out how to put it together. And the first draft was actually only Ava. I did not have it dual POV. I had eventually some of those scenes I switched to be from Bash's POV, and some of the scenes, and then I added a lot of chapters from his POV. So this being my debut book, there was a lot more drafts. With my second book, I've found that it's a lot easier to write. It's a little bit more chronologically, especially because I know where I came from. But there's a lot of scenes that if I have a scene in my head and I know what I want it, then I'll just write it down and then I'll figure out how we get there, because I know it's getting there eventually. But I'm not one of those people that can wait and just be like, in 10 chapters I will be writing this. I'm like, no, we can add to this in 10 chapters, but I'm writing this scene right this second. It took probably about a year total to have like a final draft, and even then I was always editing it.
Yeah. And then you said the second book you have pretty much written, correct? Did you say that earlier?
Pretty much written, yes. It is. Well, I wanted to make sure that world building wise, if there was something I needed to fix in book one before book one published. So I was absolutely manic as far as like, I need to at least get this first draft out there so that if there's something I need to change in book one for book two to make sense, then it needs to all be able to tie together. So yes. And it's very much written book one and two as a duology. The third book is going to be more of a spin-off book. So we are going to get sort of that conclusion at the end of book two. So again, sorry for the mean cliffhanger, but there's that.
I was wondering, I knew it was going to be a trilogy, but I was curious of like how that was all going to work out. So duology, and then like the third book is like going to be a spinoff of like other characters.
Yes, I will not tell you how, but yes. There'll be a nice little spin-off still in the world, and obviously all of our favorites will, still be around.
Yes. And earlier we were going through how to pronounce these names. So, and I think we got cut off, so we probably need to do this again. So we've got Bash, obviously. And then if you could please explain the Eva sitch.
Yes.
I said Eva because that's how I was reading it, but yes.
So I'm very much a proponent of, once my book is out in the world, you are the reader and it's your book now. So if you want to pronounce it a certain way, please just go for that. But in my head, I pronounce Evangeline with that, like the Evangeline, so that therefore Ava is Ava, which I know sounds like it should be the AVA. So that means as this book has come out, I was like, oh my God, I didn't realize this would be something controversial, but I call her Ava in my head because Evangeline doesn't have the E, or I guess some people could call it Evangeline, but anyways, call her what you want. But in my head, it's Ava and Bash, and then Yael, Yael's actually my Hebrew name. So I wanted to incorporate that in the book, and I love that. I love her character.
I love her. She's a badass. I love her. He's like, I love her personality. Yes. And I was wondering how you pronounce that too. I was like, is it Yale? So say that one more time.
Yael. Yes. So yeah, it's and then there's Riven, which I again, if you want to call him Riven and that's what's in your head, then I truly don't care. But that's yeah, and Marin and who else am I forgetting?
I think I was saying Marin. I think I was saying Marin, but I was saying Riven. And then is it Aviel?
Aviel. Mm-hmm. I should probably do a pronunciation thing on Instagram now that you're going through this. One of my author friends, Ariella Isabella, did this really great like going through each name and each place and stuff. And I was like, it's okay. People can figure it out. But now that we're doing this, I'm like, this is something that I've read and really haven't said aloud. So maybe I should.
You know, it's funny because like I know with some fantasy books, right? I mean, like the jokes are all over the place of like how to actually pronounce it out loud. And you see like those like memes of like, when I was going through or going to or whatever, blah, 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 blah. And
yes.
Do you know what I'm saying? There's like
and I'm exactly that person. When I read books, I swear the names go in one ear and out the other. And I have, it's actually really funny because my friends, I'm known to be angry when they take names that are like normal names and then add like random Y's. And then I realized that my own, so Evyn's actually my middle name, it's Dana Evyn. And then I realized that my own name has the fantasy Y in it. It's the EVYN. And I was like, I have the fantasy Y, which is like, and like a hint of professional distance, but you know, there's no expectation of real privacy in this day and age.
And I think as a reader, I'm honestly like, I think it's beautiful. You're like, okay, put it out into the world. It's now your book. As a reader, though, I'm like, I want to be the way that the author intended. So now I'm moving forward. I'm probably going to be like saying Ava in my mind now. So I appreciate you going through those names with me.
Perfect. Well, even a good idea as far as I'll go on and be like, go do like an Instagram story collection of some sort and be like, you can do this however you want, but in case you wanted to know. So there's that.
I love that. Okay, so I have a couple more questions, and then we'll probably start to wrap up. This has been so much fun, like seriously, so much fun. I was curious, who are some of your literary like heroes? Who do you love to read? You know,
I mean, as an indie author, I really do love supporting indie books, but like a lot of people, my introduction to Romantasy was A Court of Thorns and Roses. I have to, give props to the queen, SJM herself. There's something about, like having grown up in that like 2000s era, that like Fourth Wing hit, and all of a sudden I was just like, I feel like this is just like Hunger Games with dragons. And I just love like that sort of nostalgia vibe of just like, this is written in a way that feels familiar to me. But I love Raven Kennedy. I've just enjoyed the Guild series, and I think my current favorite author right now is Carissa Broadbent, and like Serpent of the Wings of Night, that whole Daughter of Their Worlds. I just adore her writing style, but I could probably talk authors all day.
No, I mean, I love book gushing with you, but yes, absolutely. And I don't know, like as you were writing, any like go-to songs that you listened to that helped inspire you?
So funnily enough, I have a very hard time listening to anything that has words in it, because if I'm writing and I'm listening to a song, I will then write the words that I'm hearing. And it sounds so stupid. But so because of that,
that is real. That is real.
And I'll be going back through drafts and being like, what the heck happened here? And then I'll recognize a song lyric and I'm like, for F's sake. In any case, I listen to a lot of soundtracks because of that. I love anything by Hans Zimmer. The man is a genius. Like Pirates of the Caribbean, like if you're writing an action scene and you want that just sort of like da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da. I'm a pianist, so I'm very into like just musical scores in my other life. And then, I mean, I'm a big Taylor Swift fan, so I often find that listening to her songs while driving leads me to pull over and jot down some good ideas, because there's something about her writing that's just like, it's just so creative and interesting. And you're like, wow, this is so applicable to this. And then suddenly you have a new idea. But yeah, I really like the How to Train Your Dragon soundtrack. I have kids, so I listen to a lot of Disney, but I also think I listened to a lot of Disney before I had kids, so I don't think that's a real excuse.
I mean, girl. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I love it.
And I love the Bridgerton soundtrack. Oh my God. They have instrumental versions of a bunch of Currents music.
I mean, I just love that series. I love Bridgerton. But of course, like we would, because we're into Romantasy, right? But like I
love how they did the adaptation. Like I read the books, but the Netflix show is just so great, and I cannot wait for the new season. But the music, like it's just there's so many great yearning songs, and so a lot of that, like Bash and Ava going through the woods, was like set to the Bridgerton score.
I love that. That's so great. And
I do have I did make a Spotify list for The Other Side of the Mirror, which you can find in my link tree on whatever social medias, which includes a lot of songs that I found myself listening to as I wrote it, but also a lot of inspired by sort of things. Her new album, somebody tagged me in a Guilty as Sin, is just full of Oh my gosh, well now I feel stupid for not knowing it was you.
No.
I just love the mine on your inner thigh. I just like the writing is fantastic, and I'll go full Swiftie. But yes, in any case, it was very flattering to have that song be compared to them. So thank you. I appreciate it, because that's like one of my favorite songs from that album, if not my favorite.
Okay, one last question, and then I think we do need to start to wrap up, unless there's anything else that you wanted to talk about. But
no, you've done a great job with this.
The world building. I know earlier you were kind of talking about that, and that your sister was like, "Okay, please explain this here." Da 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 da. I just wanted to just throw this out there. I loved the world building. I am all about a romantasy that like there's some travel involved. There's some like, explorations of different scenes.
I feel like I mean, I love a good travel scene. I love like, this is the journey and how are we going to get here? And like, let's have like some moments along the way of like, let's get to know each other. Cause especially the book happens in a pretty small amount of time. Like you're traveling and you're in Moorhaven, and it's nice to have that sort of like, let's talk about how they got there instead of just they've gotten there. But I feel like there's a good amount of books where like the world building just hits you in the face, and I do kind of love that, especially when you hit high fantasy. But I wanted this, especially because it's romantasy, to have that sort of accessibility where it's like, it's familiar, and like we can kind of figure things out as you go along a little bit. And there's, obviously there's still going to be a couple like chunky paragraphs where it's like, here's what elemental and celestial magic is, and here's our like how our world's set up, and thank God there's a map to reference, because let's figure out where these different places are and how they align to each other. But it was really fun figuring that out, and it was actually one of those things that was surprising to me as I wrote it, because I was like, I feel like I was so focused on the romance of it, like the story of it, that like the world building just kind of evolved as I like wrote things and I needed things. And I'm very happy with how it all came together.
Yeah. I was going to say that really worked. Like I can see after reading the book, like what you just said, I can see that. And like, it felt very natural, like a natural progression,
I feel like my biggest weakness, though, is that a lot of times I'll have stuff in my head, and that's why betas are great, because they'll just be like, Dana, you have to explain this. I'm sure you understand this, but you need to let the rest of us know, like, how this works and, like, how this is interconnected. And I'm like, oh, yeah, didn't I, like, write that down? I didn't? Oh, thanks. It's something that I'm getting better at as I, like, write more. But especially as I went draft to draft, and, like, you hit this part where you're just like, oh, I can explain this better now. And the first time I wrote it, I probably couldn't explain it as well as I could upon like the 17th or 32nd reread or whatnot. I'm sure there's a better way to do this. And I know that there's like some authors that have like different apps for these sorts of things where they just to keep world building straight. But right now I just have like my master document. Like maybe it's the the Microsofty in me, but I just have like, this is my world building. These are my characters. Here's like, character descriptions. This is their magic. This is their relationships. Like anytime I have something where I think I will need it later, I drop it in that document. So it is massive and probably could be better organized, but especially as I like am writing like future things in this world, it's very nice to have that sort of document to go back to. But it's funny how things stick in your head though. Like it's kind of like when you read a book that you really like, how like you can kind of like think of the line in that section. So a lot of times I'll be like, I feel like I need to like reference something, and like the line will just pop into my head, and I'll like, search on I'll search in my Kindle version now of my book to be like, oh, that's right, I did say this. Good.
That's awesome. I do that too in my Kindle. I'll search. I'll be like, okay, now who is, and then it helps me to remember. I don't know. And I'm not even a writer.
Everything too. Like even when I just read in general, I'm like Kindle highlighter. Like if you have, I have like 50% of the book highlighted, and I'm just like. But then when I reread, I can like I know the best parts, so that's nice.
Yes, absolutely. And I am someone too that like in my actual hardcover book, I don't like marking it up, but in my Kindle, I will mark that shit up and I will highlight. I mean, I wish I could like write
People
notes.
do such beautiful things with like highlighting the books, and I'm like, oh, it feels so sacrilegious, and I love it, but I'm just like, I don't think I can. I don't think I can do it. And now I'm like, I have like so many copies of my own book. I can do it to like one copy, and I just I will eventually do this.
I'm right there with you.
I just love it when people do it though, and it's like the pretty squiggles and the circles, and I'm just like, I've never done this to a book ever, but
never. I haven't.
I'm going to annotate my own book. It'll be fun. I hope.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. No, there's some really amazing artists out there, and I mean, definitely in the book world, the bookish world, whatever. So many wonderful artists, and when they do some cool designs in the book, I'm here for it.
I've had the pleasure to work with some really amazing artists, like the bookish art that for the other side of the mirror that I've like commissioned, that's like featured on my Instagram. Like I'm obsessed with. There's something about seeing your characters come to life and that like artistic vision that's just so amazing and so cool. And everyone's just so nice and kind to work with too. Like it's been a real treat. Sort of getting to know that world.
Yes. Everybody's so supportive, I feel like.
So supportive. Oh yes. No, the artist community and then just the bookstagram community too. Mm-hmm. A lot of my reaching out for like art stuff, like it was posted through NetGalley and like, like the normal sort of like ARC sites. But a lot of times I would just find people I liked on Instagram and I'd slide into their DMs and be like, hey, I have arcs for this book that I wrote. And I you want to make sure it's very clear, like there's no pressure here. Like you do not have to read this. And here's my content warnings. You definitely don't have to read this if you have any problems with that list. And everyone was so nice. Like 99% of the people I reached out to was like, I'd be happy to. And like the other like 1% was like, oh, I don't know if I'll be able to get it done in time. And I'm like, that's fine. Like if you don't read it, that's not a problem with me. And if you eventually do read it and want to leave a review, like an honest review, then great. Like a review later is also very, wonderful and kind. And yes. And if you don't read it, then you don't read it. And that is what it is. But it's interesting. There's been a lot of ARC discourse lately. And I feel like I was very fair as far as being like, hey, do you want to read my ARC? I wrote a book. And then, oh, much, no worries. That's fine.
I was just thinking that as you were talking, like there has been a lot of discourse on that. And it's interesting. And I love your perspective. And
oh yeah, no, these people who are reading your ARC are doing you a favor, and I feel like there should never be an onus to do anything. Like if you don't read it, you don't read it. Like life happens, and I think that's an important thing to remember. as a and I'm never going to be that person that's like keeping a list or like, did they write a review? Like, that's just not who I am. I have kids. I've got too much going on. I need to finish my sequel.
And we
I don't have time for that. Never mind the rest of the connotations.
Yes. No, we definitely need that sequel. I cannot wait for it to come out. Do you have a tentative release date that you could share? If not, that's okay.
Yeah, I'm so sorry.
Okay.
I promise I will let you know as soon as I do.
Yes. This was so much fun, Dana. I loved it.
Thank you for reaching out. I especially want to thank you for ARC reading and for being such a great supporter of my book, and especially a debut indie, author. It's been just really very kind of you to host me on this, and I'm so happy you thought of me.
I truly love your book, so I cannot wait for this sequel to come out.
Well, thank you so much. I'm hoping that'll be sooner than later, but I have no promises right now on dates, because goodness knows that I'm hoping to have one soon. But thank you again for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for listening to the Romantasy Library and my very first interview with the one and only Dana Evyn, author of The Other Side of the Mirror. You can find her book on Amazon or Barnes & Noble in both the paperback and hardcover formats. I loved talking with her and learning more about who she is and her writing process. It was truly a joy and so much fun getting to talk with her. If you enjoyed this interview, please subscribe and stay tuned for future interviews. I have a fun lineup of future authors to come. Thank you so much. This has been so much fun and such a gift to be able to talk with authors who write books that make my heart sing. Hi there, everyone. I wanted to include this fact check at the end of the interview to make sure I present the most accurate statistics for sexual assault, as we talked about with Dana. Please note this is a huge trigger warning, especially for those who have experienced sexual assault. Please take care of your hearts. If this is triggering to you, feel free to fast forward through to the end or choose not to listen to it, and that is okay. Just know that I'm thankful you are here. Here are some of the most recent numbers and information I found from the CDC website on sexual violence. So stop here if this is triggering for you, or if you want to skip over it, that is totally okay. Researchers know the numbers underestimate sexual assault because so many cases are unreported, especially within the LGBTQ+ community due to fear, backlash, and shame. Reports show that over half of women and almost 1 in 3 men have experienced some form of sexual violence during their lifetimes. 1 in 3 women and about 1 in 9 men have experienced sexual harassment in a public place. If you have experienced sexual assault, please know there's help and it doesn't define you. Hugs to you, and thank you so much again for listening, and take care.